Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another eventful, fun evening with the Virtual Tasting Society. I'm Jane Kilkenny, subbing for Vivian Perlovsky this evening. We are excited to welcome Tom Levron from Bhakta. We had a bunch of people had the pleasure of getting to travel to the campus earlier this year, and we're pleased to have them here with a wonderful set of samples. So Tom, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm really glad to see the excitement around our brand and to see all your beautiful faces joining us.
No problems.
I understand that some of you have heard already some stories from the trip here to campus. So I'm glad that generated a little more excitement as well. Let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then we'll delve into Bhakta and start tasting some beautiful spirits. So my name is Tom. I am originally from Israel, been in California, San Diego County specifically for 7 years now. I started working with Bhakta just shy of a year, loving every minute. I'm a father for 3 girls, girl dad, and proud of it. And I'm right now in Vermont in our college campus here. So let me tell you a little bit about the brand and then add a little story about why we operate outside of the college. And if you don't mind muting while you're not speaking, just so we don't have the reverb. So Bhakta spirits named after Raj Bhakta's last name, the very founder of Whistlepig whiskey. So Raj founded Whistlepig around 2009, right after the financial crisis. He just recently, before that, bought a farm right here up the road in Shoreham, Vermont. He was plotting what to do because basically all of his funds were tied up in investments that he couldn't really liquidate at the time. And then the idea of starting a whiskey company began. And then he brought onto the company the late, great master distiller, Dave Pickerel, that really we owe so much for both where the bourbon industry is nowadays from its days with Maker's Mark, as well as where the rye category has been built thanks to Whistlepig. So now we have a luxury rye category. So Raj sold his share of Whistlepig about 5 years ago, made a fortune off of it, quite frankly, and decided that he's not done with spirits just yet. And while on a trip to Europe with family, he ended up in France. While he was in France, they were in this chalet. His wife, Dan, he just found out that baby number 4 was on the way and wasn't very happy about it. By the way, they just had baby number 5, little Elijah. So everything has changed since then. But at the time, again, found out that baby number 4 was on the way. Wasn't very happy about it. Kicked him out of the chalet that they were staying in with a broom. So he knew that he had some time for himself at that point. He got into this Cadillac Escalade that he had imported from the US, probably the only one in France at the time. Got into the car, rolled onto the French countryside. He got this tip from Amanda, who is now employed by Bhakta, but back in the time was the educator for the BNIA, the National Armagnac organization in France, really an authority when it comes to Armagnac knowledge. And she gave him a tip. She told him, listen, you may want to go visit this chateau in Condom, France. So for those of you who are not too familiar with the region of Armagnac, we're talking about southwestern France, wedged between Bourguignon and Bordeaux, and the Pyrenees, has this really beautiful microclimate. And in the city of Condom, there's the Museum of Armagnac, which just so happens to be, used to be called Chateau Rice du Perron. That's where the tip he got from Amanda. He gets there, blasting on the sound system of this tank of a vehicle, "Be Our Guest" from Beauty and the Beast. The quasi-aristocrat that comes to welcome him is absolutely appalled by this obnoxious American rolling into his chateau. But after they got over that, they roll out these trays, silver trays full of beautiful vintage Armagnac dating back to 1868. And Roz's jaw absolutely just drops. It didn't help the negotiation that was about a year long after that. But then at the end of which, Raj purchased the entire chateau with vintage spirits, with Armagnac spirits going back to the 19th century. We are now the proud owners of 30% of the world supply of any spirit in any category that is 50 years or older, so a pretty big cash already, but then 50% of the world supply of any spirit in any category that is 100 years or older. So very exciting, very unique vintage spirits. And with the appreciation that the majority of consumers are still unaware of Armagnac as a category completely, let alone have had to taste too much, we acknowledge that we will have to educate and bring people to the fold to what we think is our crown jewel and one of the most exciting categories of spirits out there. But in the meantime, what we're trying to bring the appreciation from the category of Armagnac is this appreciation of single vintages. So we have dubbed ourselves the preeminent house of vintages, and we are trying to champion single vintage spirits in many spirit categories, as well as using our beautiful Armagnac casks for cask finishes, such as the first taste that we'll have tonight, which I will stop talking soon so we can enjoy our spirit. The 2014 bourbon, which we finished in our 1973 Armagnac casks, which we also will get a taste of. So that's one way we're using the Armagnac. Another way is using the liquid in some very creative blends that we think are definitely pushing the envelope to the point of pretty much ripping it all together. So let's start with 2014 bourbon. I think this will be a great kind of place to start from. Slante, l'chaim, cheers. So what we have here is a 52.7% ABV bourbon. We're talking 99% corn mash bill from MGP from Indiana. So a unique mash bill to begin with. Right off the bat, there's not a whole lot of bourbons that are made from this mash bill. And the idea was to really find a mash bill that, first of all, would be on its own a little more interesting than what is already found on the market. But then on top of that, something that the Armagnac finish could really lend something to. And we thought that the spices from the Armagnac would really contribute to the flavors of the corn. So 99% corn mash bill, 9 years in New American oak, and then 125 days in our 1973 single vintage Armagnac that just so happens to be the winner of the title of #1 spirit in the world for 2023 by the Ultimate Spirits Challenge competition, headed by Paul Picault, which also just so happens to be the very last competition that he will ever have. So we are very proud of that title. So a really unique bourbon, a 9-year-old bourbon, but on top of that, finished in a 50-year-old Armagnac.
The nose is lovely. You just that little bit of Armagnac comes out on underneath the bourbon, and then when you taste it, it's right there. That's so amazing. I can't wait to get to the 73 now.
And for those few of you that were on campus and had a chance to taste the 2013, or if any of you had a chance to purchase 2013 bourbon, our first bourbon release from, say, the concierge program on Total Wine or wherever, we do have some of these 2013 bottles available through retailers throughout California. But we as a company are already completely sold out of the 2013. So the main difference between those two, what we went here with, what we went with here with the 2014 is a slightly higher ABV point. We thought that this whiskey, as opposed to the 2013, was able to handle such a point. It's only about 2-3% alcohol increase, but you definitely pick up on more oils on this one. And then we used our 1973 single vintage as opposed to our Bhakta 50 casks in the 2013 vintage. So there is a noticeable flavor difference. I do highly recommend, if you wanted to have kind of a comparative tasting, we do have some of those available in Total Wines around you, in High Time in Costa Mesa. There probably is still some 2013 there. And I'm happy to recommend more retailers that may still carry bottles of it. Please feel free. Now is a great time if you want to share your notes on the 2014.
We have a couple of comments in the chat. Randa said, ripe fruit and honey on the nose. Tim thought it had a great nose, and based on that, you would assume it would be very sweet, but it's not. Great flavor profile, just enough typical bourbon notes, but lets the other spicier notes shine through.
Very nice.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. It definitely has a lot of really fruity notes on the nose. The honey kind of comes through on the palate as well. It's got a really nice spicy note to it that I haven't quite figured out what it is, but it's kind of, it's almost like mace. Not nutmeg, but just the actual mace itself. It's really quite fascinating. I have to assume that that might be the Armagnac influence, possibly.
So Armagnac, so I think this may be a great segue into like very short Armagnac education, just to bring us into some of the next expressions we will have, which will have all a little bit of Armagnac in the blend, as well as the very last spirit that we'll taste, our single vintage 1973. So Armagnac, as I mentioned, the region we're talking about is southwestern France. The climate is very different from its other French designation of origin brandies. Calvados in the north, in Normandy, and then Cognac, probably the most well-known of French brandies. So the climate on its own already makes the grapes behave very differently. But another distinguished difference between Armagnac and Cognac is that in Cognac, as you may know, only one grape variety is allowed to be used, which is Uni Blanc, where in Armagnac, there are 10 different varietals to pick from, including one that you may know from the wine industry, Colombard, which is very floral and bright. We use Baco 22, as well as Folie Blanche. Those are like 4 of the more common ones. So there's already much more variety when it comes to the flavor profile that you can get from the eau de vie, from the grape brandy, the grape distillate that you make in Armagnac. But then on top of that, it is a single distillation product. So we are using what is called the Alambic d'Armagnac, the Armagnac Alembic, which is one of the oldest iterations of an alembic still in the world. Armagnac just so happens to be also the very oldest distilled spirits that we have actual written history about. So the very oldest distilled spirit, or potable distilled spirits, I should say, that we have written history about is Armagnac from the 14th century. Not too shabby. That's a pretty long time ago. So this is the OG craft spirit, really. And as you mentioned, it definitely has, or at least the older Armagnacs, as they age and as they oxidize, they definitely get these dried fruit notes. Very common to get dried apricot, plum, fig. And then on top of that, the even older ones definitely get these winter spice notes, these allspice, mace, cinnamon, as well as notes that we like to call, and I'll go into a little further into depth on that when we get to the 1973, what is referred to as rancio, this kind of mustiness. So once everybody's ready to move on from their bourbon, the next one we will pour is our 1928. All right. So 1928 is a pretty new product. So as I mentioned, like the company has been around for about 4 years. Raj, as I mentioned, also purchased a chateau in France full of all these beautiful Armagnacs. And right before the pandemic, he had this opportunity to buy this, our base of operation, this college campus in Vermont, in Pulteney, Vermont. Maybe one of you or some of you have heard of Green Mountain College, a small liberal arts college in Pulteney, Vermont. We are here in the middle of it. This is where we operate. The oldest building here, Ames Hall, was built in the 19th century. So definitely a beautiful backdrop for a company that peddles in 19th century spirits. I'm currently sitting in the library, and once I pour us some once we pour our some 1928 and start tasting, I would love to take you on a little tour. So basically what we went for with this one is we wanted to bring to market a product that would be more approachable as far as price point. We wanted to not just bring any other whiskey to the market because, as I'm sure you know, there are so many. Many of them are sourced from very few places, including MGP, the year after year #1 distillery in the US. They do amazing stuff, but for the most part, many bourbon and rye companies stick to very formulated mash bills, maybe put on a nice finish on top of it, and that is about it. So we figured we need something extra. We can't just put out another whiskey and for it to be our spearhead, our flagship of the whole operation. So what we did here is we paired a 5 years old 2018 vintage rye from MGP. The classic rye, 51% rye, 43% corn, and the rest is malted barley, mostly for the enzymatic effect. And then we took that, so 60% of the bottle is that beautiful, spicy, bold, young rye. And we paired it with 30% XO Calvados and 10% Armagnac vintages from 1996, 1973, which we'll get to taste today, #1 spirit in the world, 1962, 1941, a war vintage that we are ever so lucky to even have because the Nazis definitely enjoyed French spirits and pillaged through France like crazy. So we're ever so fortunate to even have war vintages. And then the namesake of this bottle, 1928, is yet another vintage that we have in the bottle. So we get to bring to market something that holds inside it, inside the blend, a nearly 100-year-old spirit, right from the Roaring 20s, which, as you can probably tell by the shape of the bottle, is a great inspiration for us. Raj longs for the optimism and creativity that the US has seen during the 1920s. We've seen some really unique ventures during that time. People coming up with speakeasies, some of the best cocktails that we've had in American history, some of the best music. So we definitely think that we deserve some optimism to bring back some optimism to our to nowadays. And hopefully 1928 can do that for you. It is a 50% alcohol spirit. And again, the idea was to try to pair this really spicy, bold rye with these beautiful, sweet, luxurious notes of the brandy. Now, something that the group that was here on campus was able to do was a little blending session of their own version of 1928. So we have this really cool program that we put together. Pretty much every brand that does whiskey nowadays has a barrel pick program. And we thought, okay, again, we like to do things differently. We would like to have something that is truly unique. So instead of doing a barrel pick program, which usually requires retailers to commit to an entire barrel, 200 to 300 bottles on average, we decided to come up with something with a much lower commitment. So only 72 bottles, about 6 traditional cases. And for the retailer to be able to make their own blend of 1928 in which they get to choose. So it's still 60% of the rye, but then the retailer gets to choose between 3 different Calvados options, between the classic French oak, the aging that we use, a bourbon finished Calvados, or an Isla smoky Scotch finished Calvados if you want something funky and weird. And then the last 10%, the Armagnac vintages, there's again a choice between 1 and 4 different vintages out of a selection of a total of 8 of them. So a pretty big matrix. It can be something very custom. It's something very hands-on. And again, the group that came here to campus was able to do it themselves. So I would love to hear if they would be willing and not too shy to chime in and tell about their experience about that. And that is something that we would very much like, Vadim and I would very much like to try to extend to the group. So Vadim actually came up with a blend that he felt very strongly about. And he would like to consider to bring that as a group pick. And he would just very much like to have like the commit to see who is willing to commit. So again, if we can get closer to about the 72 bottles that were required, Vadim would be very happy to do something like that. And part of the picks that I picked for tonight, part of the spirits that we'll be tasting today are there in order to provide you a little bit of a scope of what can be contributed by the different components that we have in 1928. So the 2707, even though it is not 100% Calvados, was finished in Isla casks. So you'll see how that may behave. And of course, we have the 1973, which is an always available vintage. So as we go along, keep that in mind, that those are flavors that could be a part of the VTS's personal blend. Let me shut up now, give the stage to the group members that were here if they'd like to contribute about their experience about the blending of the bonbon, and then we can talk about notes of 1928.
Come on, go on there, James. Don't be shy. Speak up.
It was definitely fun.
Speak up.
It was definitely fun.
Wait, I'll mute myself so we don't get the reverb.
I'll mute myself so we don't get the.
I tried to put some picture. They gave us some white doctor alchemist gown and with the master distillers. I remember we have the option only of the five Armagnacs. That was supposed to be 2% of each, but the Calvados was the options to choose. Of course, I picked the pitted one. But make it funky as you can. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. James, what you picked as the Calvados?
I remember the first day being there. That's about it.
And we have Josh. Josh, what you pick on your? Oh, you were in the mixing or no? You mute.
Yeah, I was trying to find a photo on my phone, but couldn't get to it on time. But I remember it being sub-0 degrees in the lab, freezing cold. But it was probably one of the best parts of the trip for me. I thought the whole idea of like going in to build your own bourbon or whiskey was definitely a differentiator and something you know, I probably could spend 5 hours in there just trying different combinations to come up with something you liked.
Yeah, I'm cool. I'm glad that it left a positive impact. So I'm gonna turn off my camera real quick here in my computer and switch to the phone, and I'll let you share your tasting notes on 1928, and then we'll start a little tour of the library before we move forward. Feel free to share like in the chat or on video, whatever you're more comfortable with.
Well, I'm gonna be the one that's, you know, bourbon is not my thing generally, so I find it very sweet. But my wife is a fan. But I'm looking forward to trying the 2707. You said that was the one with peated.
Correct. So the 2707 is the one that will have a kiss of peat on it, specifically Isla peat. So we know that is a
Right.
special.
And the 2707 does not have any rye in it either.
No, so the 2707 is a blend of brandies. So we'll get to that next.
Interesting.
But the 1928 is a blend of rye and two different brandies, Calvados and Armagnac. So likely the sweeter notes that you're getting on 1928 are predominantly from the apple, from the Calvados.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of rye either, so I guess I'm just difficult.
Ilana agree.
And I see Amanda is saying, I really get the Calvados coming through. Yeah.
No, Ilana actually likes it. I'm just kind of I think it's not bad, but you know, yeah, it's not my thing.
I have to admit, when Vadim mentioned the trip to Batka, the options, I went, the first thing I went to the store and bought the bottle. Of course, it's affordable, so that's the reason why I bought that. And I didn't want another bourbon or another rye, but and I was skeptic. Like I said, okay, it's a gimmick. Like I don't think anyone before Batka was mixing
Three different spirit categories.
yeah, those kind of category, and I said, okay, I came very, very skeptic to open it and taste it, to even decide if I want to go and spend the money to go in to Batka. And I was surprised. Like, yeah, of course, it's not. If you expect the whiskey, it's totally different things. But if you have some, if you're looking on something desserty, something the end of the day, something for a winter night, wow, it's a lot of fun. It's smooth, it's creamy, it's and it's different. So that's for me kind of what make okay, there's something into it here. I let's see if I have the time to jump to the tree. So that was my experience with the bottle. I still half empty, working on it slowly but surely.
So about price, I will say I didn't mention any prices. So the 2014 suggested retail price, of course, I'm only talking about suggested retail prices because these will vary from retailer to retailer ever so slightly. But suggested retail price is $149.99. Where the Bhakta 1928 that we just had is a significantly more affordable spirit, despite having all these really ancient spirits within the blend. So here we're talking a $69.99 suggested retail price bottle, where in the blend, again, there's a nearly 100-year-old spirit. The only other spirit in the market that has such old spirits within the blend is Louis XIII Cognac. So a pretty stark price difference between a $69 bottle and a few $1,000 bottle. So that's something that we are very proud of and happy that we get to share with the world, these old vintages in a blend that we curated. Realistically, based on what is in the bottle, we would have had to probably price it higher. From what we did the math, would have been likely around the 100, 120 suggested retail price. But we are very much using this as our claim to fame, if you will, or introduction, if you will, because we believe that people that will try this will understand that the brand is really doing creative stuff. So the conversation around other spirits, and we have vintage spirits, again, going back to the 19th century. So prices can climb up as you go back in history. But this is what builds the credibility for the brand. And of course, if you're not a rye drinker, it might not appeal to you, but we have seen a lot of people that consider themselves not rye drinkers, and something about those sweeter flavors draw you in a little easier. So without further ado, let me take you on a little tour. All right, can you wait? I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
You try it again.
One sec. I'm just gonna step away from my computer. All right, can you hear me from my phone?
Yeah, that's good.
Very cool. All right, so I'm here inside the Griswold Library. Let me turn the camera. As you can see, we have some barrels right inside our spirits library, which is something that we are very happy and proud of. So as you come to campus, you get to explore our vintage spirits library inside the actual library of what used to be called Green Mountain College, now Bhakta Griswold. So we have down here in the first floor, right next to the very same books that were used by students here on campus, barrels. So here on the first floor, we have 1990s and 1980 barrels, as well as some more experimental barrels that Raj concocted together, some blends, some unique blends, some future releases, Indian 2018 Indian single malt perched right here, our 2013 Calvados finish that was released last year, and here there's the 2014 that we just had. These casks, of course, are all just for educational purposes. That none of what we have inside the library will we bottle. And of course, we won't be able to call anything Armagnac or Calvados if we were to bottle it here in the United States. All of our single vintage Calvados and Armagnac is bottled in the States. We have some other experiments that we're hoping to release at some point, but some very creative items. And then on top, we also have some 1970 vintages. So just a little sneak peek of what you can expect if and when you come to campus. We hope to open the experience. I guess I don't have lighting up there, so we'll skip the second floor. But yeah, I think you get the gist. Hopefully, soon enough, we will be able to open this to the general public and be able to bring whiskey enthusiasts, because right now this is more geared towards retailers, bar managers and owners, and the likes. I will say if you feel very passionately about coming here, we have had Vadim's or a select few of Vadim's group over, which was something very unique. We usually don't do this for consumer groups, but we have had before retailers that have wanted to bring their top clients over with them. So just something to keep in mind. If you want to come here, you don't have to go and moonlight as a bartender. There are other ways we can have you over. Let me go back to my computer and we'll go into 2707. All right. You can go away now. So ready for the next one? So the next one we have, 2707, is a genuinely unique blend. It is, I think there's a pretty wide consensus among the staff here, the ministers of spirits of Bhakta, that it's our personal favorite. It's definitely been an industry favorite by bartenders. So 2707 was meant to be originally the blend that was supposed to get Bhakta into the market and get us onto menu cocktails, which now 1928 took that position. The reason 2707 didn't end up being that was because of a funny mishap that we had with the label. So the name 2707 was named after the vintages that were supposed to go into the bottle. So we were, or the age statements of the spirits. So we were supposed to have in here a 27-year-old Calvados, excuse me, a 27-year-old Armagnac and a 7-year-old Calvados. In the bottle, we have 90% Calvados, so it would have been predominantly a younger Calvados, and then 10% Armagnac, 27-year-old. However, our cellar master in France, in the Chateau Giles, made a bit of a mistake. He was a little impatient, and he didn't know much about the regulations here in the US and about the TTB, and didn't know that once you approve a label and the pricing, you can't go back. And we've already approved the label, the name, the pricing, everything. And he ended up blending a 49 years old Armagnac with an 18-year-old Calvados, so nearly doubling the age statement all around. Which was a costly mistake. We endearingly like to call the 2707 Giles's folly, or the Frenchman's folly. But it was a beautiful mistake. What we did for the Calvados we finished in Isla casks. So really the smokiness that you'll get from this is mainly from the Calvados. And as you can imagine, because of how costly this mistake was for us, we decided we will have to kill the label. So now we are nationally sold out of 2707. I wouldn't have teased you this way and given you a taste of something that you can't find. So retailers in California still have some availability, not a whole lot, quite frankly, because this has been out in the market for a while. But there are some retailers in California that still have some bottles of 2707. 45% ABV. You'll definitely get some apple notes here, of course, 90% Calvados, and a slightly younger Calvados than what we've used in the 1928. So you'll get more vibrant apple notes. But then you can definitely pick up light notes of the Isla on the nose. On the palate, I feel like it is even more apparent. And just comes off as this baked apple, almost kind of bonfire baked apple. It reminds me of parts of childhood. My great grandma would make baked apples stuffed with nuts and dried fruit and cinnamon. So that's what it invokes in me personally. And we all like it because it's just very unique. We haven't heard of anybody aging brandy, let alone Calvados, arguably the best apple brandy available in Isla casks. So there's just something funky and unique and weird about it. And the majority of us come from bar, so it's usually hard to bring us something we haven't tried. As so many of us, the category that is our favorite is Amari. So we're used to bitter and weird and all sorts of layers of flavor. And here there's something that is genuinely unique that most of us haven't tasted before. Price point on this one, suggested retail price is between $75 and $80. So again, that was supposed to be the more affordable one. Now 1928 is even more affordable than that. And again, as I mentioned, available in a few stores around California. Wouldn't be hard to find with a quick Google search. I know for a fact that there is at least one Total Wine in San Diego County that has a few bottles. What do you think of it?
See, now you're getting me on board, and I'm already trying to find it locally. But I'm struck out with Mission Liquor and Total Wine, so and K&L so far.
Did you try just a plain old Google search?
Yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, High Time Wine Cellars, I believe, would have some inventory still. One of my favorite partners down in San Diego and Escondido, Holiday Wine Cellar, I believe, would have a few bottles probably. But yeah, this is the very last of the inventory out there. Whatever is in stores, it will be the very last of it. So I thought that this would be a nice treat because, again, I would never bring you something that you can't find, because if you do like it, I don't want to tease you.
Henrik, Remedy have it.
I'm sorry?
Remedy have it next to you.
Remedy has it? Anybody else wants to share their impression of it?
It's interesting. I mean, you know, I am a little bit of a peat head. You know, not that I only drink that. You know, I also drink Irish whiskey, especially when Jason is nice enough to pick up a bottle at the Cork airport, which is the only place you can buy this. But it's sweet, but it has that peaty finish, and it's a very fascinating dram. I'm a fan.
Thank you. One thing worth noting, by the way, that I don't think I mentioned. So very common in French spirits in general, let alone brandies, to add a small addition of sugar and caramel coloring. We do not adulter any of our brandies. So none of our Calvados has any sugar added to it, any caramel coloring added to it. Same with the single vintage Armagnacs, which is one thing that sets Bhakta apart compared to many other Armagnac and Calvados producers and brands out there. We just think that the spirit should not be adulterated and should be enjoyed as is. And especially, you know, like with us, with people that enjoy spirits, there's no need to add sugar. But it's pretty nice to have something that on the palate Feels so sweet, as if it's going to be genuinely sweet, but then the finish is completely dry. And here on, since it is an 18-year-old Calvados, you will start getting these musty notes that we mentioned, some of that rancio. So something that evokes old books, this layer that kind of lingers on the top of your tongue. I see a little bit of notes. Let's see.
It's funny, Alana mentioned earlier that the last dram tasted a bit like a cozy bookstore with the mustiness. I think this one has that same kind of feel to it. It makes me think of, you know, the old leather armchair in a dusty library, and, you know, smoking.
Yeah, and Ilana said it's a used bookstore, not Barnes and Noble, but a used bookstore. Apparently that makes a difference.
The Harry Potter one.
Yeah, where the pages have had some time to deteriorate a little bit.
Yeah.
That contribute some of the smell in the air.
Yeah. A couple of people are saying in the comments that it's like a Jolly Rancher.
How long it's finishing, Isla?
That is an excellent question. That is not something I'm familiar with. To be quite frank, I could make up a number, but I don't like lying. I know it wasn't a very long finish, but it is longer than our Bhakta 50. The Bhakta 50, as Golan, you might remember, is a very quick finish. It's only 2 weeks. Here we're talking slightly longer, but I can check that for you if you'd like, and I'm happy to share it to the group. Interesting. I see. So in the comments, the mention of grape Jolly Rancher. So that's kind of cool, given that the Armagnac in here is only 10%. So that may provide you a little bit of insight of how potent and flavorful and intense Armagnac is. Between 2707 and 1928, in both blends, there's only 10% Armagnac, but Armagnac is so flavorful and so rich that really very little of it is enough to contribute so much flavoring.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I'm a converted fan.
Yeah, we are all very saddened that the label will not continue because of the mistake, but we are very softly but surely trying to push Raj in the direction of coming up with something similar, because there's definitely something really cool about this.
It's just delicious.
Thank you. And then I did save the very best for last. I did mention that we consider our Armagnacs to be the crown jewel of our operation. So the last one we're going to taste is 1973 single vintage Armagnac. I did mention, by the way, when we were starting off before the recording started, I had the opportunity of tasting the next limited release that we're about to release in July 1st. So the bourbon is our current limited release, the 2014 bourbon. And you should be able to, again, still find in some retail stores our past limited releases that include our 2013 bourbon, our 2013 rye finished in Calvados casks, as well as our 1990 rum blend, which is a very unique and most delicious rum. I think the group that was here can probably attest to that. So those are all still available within some retailers, but the next one that we're coming out with in July, and all of these limited releases when we come out with them are very limited quantities. So the last one, the 2014 bourbon, was 1,500 cases, and our cases are 6-packs. So we're talking about 9,000 bottles for the entirety of the US. So not a whole lot. And so the next one that's coming out in July 1st is going to be a 2012 Indian single malt from Goa, from a distillery called Ocean King, that will be finished in Armagnac casks, or is finished in Armagnac cask. I just had a chance to taste it and it's absolutely delicious. So as I mentioned, being the preeminent house of vintages, we are experimenting with really any spirit categories that allows us to champion single vintages, these fleeting moments in time, to put a little more emphasis on the spirit in a moment in time and how it tastes right now. And then once it's gone forever, and we move on to something else, to the next one. We've been so accustomed to that approach in wine, and it's been definitely lacking in the spirits world. We're starting to see that more and more in Scotch, for sure. More Scotch companies are coming out with their single vintage offerings, and there are some spirit categories that it's definitely prominent in, but Armagnac has been doing that since the 14th century. So we again are hoping to expand the envelope to one day, probably sometime next year, have a vintage single vintage tequila finished in Armagnac casks. So there's some exciting, fun stuff to come. But without further ado, let's move to the crown jewel, our 1973 single vintage Armagnac. So all of our vintages, as you can imagine, they don't necessarily spend the entire time in cask. We have some vintages that are 150 years old. If we would have left them the entire time in cask, they would be way over extracted, and most likely we would lose almost all of it to angel share. So the cellar master's job is to move the Armagnac from barrel to barrel, from first, second, third, and so forth, fill barrels, in order to moderate the aging process, and eventually to remove them from cask if needs be, into what we call the bonbon, also known as the demi-jan glass bottles, those big balloon shaped bottles, and let it rest in glass. But when it comes to 1973, this specific vintage actually rested the entire time before we bottled it. So this is a 50-year-old spirit released last year in 2023. And just, before we even go into notes and the spirit itself, like, just for context, when we're thinking about 50-year-old spirits, how many 50-year-old spirit products are even out there? And the ones that we see, for instance, in Scotch whiskey, a Macallan 50 or a Balvenie 50, the prices there are not necessarily on the affordable side. So here we get to taste something that is 50 years old, single vintage, where the bottle in most retail shops ranges around $3.99. If you were to shop around for a 50-year-old spirit in, say, Scotch whiskey, you would have to add 2 more zeros at the end of that. So we are actually ever so fortunate that the French have been hoarding this category to themselves for all these years, and that most people are not too familiar with it, because we get to enjoy it in prices that are, granted, not impulse buy prices, but definitely within perfect reason, for again, 50-year-old spirit. Consider that we also have things into the 60s, that we all have almost the entire decade of the 1960s, and then from the 1960s to the 1860s, granted it gets more sporadic, but we have some war vintages from the 50s and 40s. We have some 1920 vintages. We have an 1888 and an 1893 and an 1868. So the ability of tasting these moments in time, for the wine geeks of you, those that really appreciate the grapes, the mere notion of being able to taste grapes that are pre-phylloxera, that is something that we simply do not have the ability to do outside of Armagnac. The ability for those of you that that have no idea what I just said with phylloxera, which was a parasite that basically annihilated the grapes in Europe, and they very much relied on the American grape cultivators to graft grapes in Europe. So for those of you that doesn't excite them very much, still consider this 1888, 1868 vintages that were into the times of Queen Victoria, that predates commercial use electricity. So there's something that we think is very romantic about these, and you can probably see I'm a little giddy even talking about it. There's something very romantic about being able to be transported back in time, because you know, alcohol is transportive as it is. When we drink a nice rum, a nice Jamaican rum, we're immediately transported to these beautiful sandy Caribbean beaches. When we drink, you know, a scotch, we think of these beautiful like mountainside green pastures. But how many spirits can we drink that also transport us back in time, in this liquid time machine? So for context, 1973, the Watergate scandal. Like, think about that. I don't know if some of you were around back then. Maybe it evokes some memories. Like, that is wild. And being able to taste your birth year and being able to taste other moments in time is pretty cool. Some of our retail partners in California actually include our entire spirits catalog. So you should be able to, for instance, with High Time, you should be able to shop around on their website, as well as Holiday Wine Cellar, and view the bulk of our vintage spirits library, and maybe find your birth year or your anniversary year or even your parents' wedding year. So there's something pretty unique and cool about that.
Before everybody gets all crazy and finishes off the most amazing thing I've ever tasted, I'd like to invite you all to come back on screen, on camera actually, so that I can get a group photo of everybody. So, thank you. So everybody raise your glass. Tom, thank you so much for this fabulous evening. We're not done yet. I just want to make sure we get a chance to give you our traditional toast before we finish. Thank you for everything. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to try these amazing, amazing liquids.
Of
Everybody,
course,
cheers. Smile at the camera. Okay, we'll see if that one isn't awful. We'll keep it. Okay, thank you. Okay, back to
and
the
I'm looking at some comments. Let's see. 1973. Jeff is writing great notes. Lots of tannins in the mouth. I see Jane, trust me, this is a big deal. I'd love to try some pre-phylloxera wines. It made me miss Flipper. That one must be an inside joke.
Flipper was a TV show from back in the day.
It was the TV show about the dolphin, and it was the
Oh,
sort of
with
thing where,
Jessica Alba?
yeah, no, back in the 70s.
Oh, okay. The one
It was
that
the
I
sort
know
of
with
thing
Jessica
where
Alba must have been
when all of that was going on, it's like you're running around and it's like you want to watch your afternoon TV programs and the president's on, and it's like, I don't want to watch the president, I want to watch Flipper.
So question for you. So Remedy, you know, so I ordered the 2707, but they also have a 50-year-old, and it said aged in Isla cask.
Okay, great, awesome. Thank you.
They're sold out of it, but you know, I was just wondering, is that the same thing as this, or is it a different 50-year-old?
So thank you for setting up the layup for me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So let's talk about Bhakta 50, which is an item that let's see if I have right here with me. Bhakta 50, there we go. I have a bottle right here. This one being barrel 1. Holy shit, I don't think I've even tasted this. I might try a little bit of it. I'll tell you a little bit about Bhakta 50. Unfortunately, we don't get to taste it tonight, but maybe in future tastings. And bottles are around in the market, so you might have a very fun scavenger hunt around LA. So this one is the very first product that Bhakta ever came to market with. So when Raj started the brand, he had this enormous cache of Armagnacs. And he knew that he's not going after the brandy drinkers. So what he wanted to capture is the audience of the whiskey drinkers. And he thought that the way that he can do that was to take the Armagnac vintages that he had, create something, a blend that is genuinely unique, and then give it a kiss of Islay in order to invoke some of those flavors, because we already feel very strongly that some of the notes in Armagnac are already very reminiscent of certain whiskeys. You definitely get a lot of the vanillin that you would find in bourbon, and you get these sweet dried fruit notes that you would get from some Highland and Speyside scotches. So we definitely thought that there's something there to bring the whiskey drinkers in. So the Bhakta 50 is a blend of 8 different vintages. The 2 bookmark vintages that go into the bottle are our very oldest vintage, 1868. And then the youngest in the blend is from 1970. So the whole blend is 50 years minimum, 50 years at the youngest, 156 because it was released in 2020, or 164, I'm sorry, 54 at the oldest. And then the 6 different vintages in between those 2 bookmarks change from barrel to barrel. We've made only 38 barrels of these. And each barrel is dedicated to a different, unique story. So Raj basically named each barrel based on either an era in time that he thought was more unique and interesting than the other, or a certain character in history that he thought has a really unique story to tell. So currently in the market, we are selling right now in California barrels 26 through 29. Barrel 26, for instance, being dedicated to Dave Pickerel, the late great master blender for Whistlepig and Maker's Mark. Barrel 27 is dedicated to Jackie Kennedy. Barrel 29 is dedicated to De Gaulle. And the reason I skipped number 28, and I'm speaking about it now, is because number 28 is dedicated to Rasputin. So we don't necessarily pick great figures in history that we want to celebrate, but rather amazing stories. And what other story can even compare to the story of Rasputin and his many attempted assassinations? So number 30 that will be released at sometime in the near future, for instance, is dedicated to a fellow Californian that some of you might have heard of, Grand Emperor Norton. If you don't know the story of Grand Emperor Norton, I highly recommend Googling it after we're done. It is a highly entertaining story. Really genuinely unique stories that we are trying to basically tell through the vintages that are put into the bottle. So we pick a year that has to do with either the character or the era that Raj wanted to champion. As I mentioned, only 38 barrels. And as I mentioned, we are currently selling barrel 26 through 29, meaning anything older than barrel 26, we are technically completely sold out of. And the only stock that we have of these older barrels is for a very specific program that we've curated called the Stockholder Program. It is a very exclusive program that we offer to very specific consumers that are looking for ways to invest in Bhakta. However, Raj had some less than favorable experiences with some of his investors with Whistlepig. So this is very much a family business, and he will not share it. But he does want to have the ability for enthusiasts and people that see the promise of the brand to kind of get in on what we're doing here early on. So the Stockholder Program allows consumers to do that through investing in actual stock. meaning liquid physical stock. So the program basically offers people to purchase 2 bottles each of, so if we're talking about Bhakta 50, for instance, 2 bottles each of each barrel, so 38 barrels, we're talking 76 bottles altogether. And that way you basically get to, unless you've started collecting Bhakta bottles when we first launched in 2020, you get access to something that most consumers simply don't have at a better price point than just buying these bottles off the market at retail value. But probably the most interesting and unique thing about it is, again, because we are essentially bringing investors, and again, in the way that you invest is in physical stock. So we sign you on this completely non-legally binding document, but we do appreciate if people take it somewhat seriously, that each of those bottles that you buy, you use one to rock and one to stock. So basically one to enjoy, share with your family and loved ones. But the other one, if you so wish, to stay on the shelf and see how it appreciates, similarly to how we've seen, or how Raj has seen with Whistlepig Boss Hog, where they were trying to sell bottles for $150 at the beginning, and now the Boss Hog #1 I've seen on secondary market for $15,000. So there's definitely the ability of collectability in it. But we are looking for people that are not necessarily looking for it strictly for the investment part of it, but that just genuinely believe in the mission and think that we're doing something as cool as we think we are doing. So on top of the stock that can be invested, if Raj approves your initiation, or not initiation, but rather like accepts you into this society, then we have a society around it that includes also trips to campus, as well as to the chateau in France with the society members. I think the most recent trip that Raj took stockholders was to Colombia to drink some viche and do like a boat tour. So pretty fun stuff. Granted, most of these collections, as you can imagine, 76 bottles, with a bottle that the price point, suggested retail price in most retail shops is around $450. So even though like the entire collection is at a discount, as you can imagine, this is not necessarily something that you may have in your pocket, in your wallet. But if you have the disposable income that allows you to invest in it, it is an amazing opportunity. We have it for Bhakta 50. We have it for our sets of our single vintage Armagnacs. So again, single vintages that we don't have a lot of. They are incredibly rare. So those are only available to our stockholders. They are unfortunately not available to the general market. So pretty unique program. And again, thank you for laying it up for me to be able to tell you about it a little bit. I genuinely love how different each barrel of the Bhakta 50 is from another, because the different vintages take on the smoke of the Isla finish differently. So I see someone in the comments, Jason, mentioned Lindbergh. So Lindbergh barrel number 25 is very kind of very peaty, blend in comparison to the other barrels, where, for instance, barrel 26 Pickerel, in my opinion, drinks more umami, more forest floor flavors and mushroom, as opposed to Lindbergh, which is again much more smoky, much more peaty. So it is very nice to compare them. You will find many of our very early adopters, such as Del Mesa Liquor down in San Diego, such as Beverly Hills Wine Company, I believe. So those guys invested very early on, and they have entire collections of barrels. I believe most of them have barrels 1 through 13. So again, some barrels that we no longer are able to even offer to the general consumer. So if you're looking for some of that, then just go on a happy scavenger hunt throughout Southern California, and you'll find some hidden gems. I see, let's see, a few more questions here. No, he's not the founder of Norton Antivirus. I'm telling you, it's worth the Google search. 1973 is like liquid sunshine. Thank you. Most of the 50s are amazing. Isn't that kind of like Futures? I'm not familiar with Futures. I'm happy to listen. Is there a list of barrels and who they are dedicated to? Yes. So we have information. So by the way, you may see bottles. If some of you have already picked up bottles, you'll see that we give as much transparency and information as we can to fit on a label that we still think is sexy. We didn't want to overload the bottle with too much information, but we definitely are all about transparency. So all the information that you may want to know about our spirits is available on the website. So if the bottle that you picked up doesn't have enough on either the main label or a bottle necker label that we have for most of them, you'll be able to find everything else on the website, including information about almost each and every vintage that details which grapes it was made in, how much time it spent in cask. So as much information as we can easily provide you. The Bhakta 50, there should be a list of all of the names and dedications that we've given each individual barrels. If you can't find it, hit me up. I'm on the VTS Facebook group. I'm happy to send you some information about that as well. I see a question about how do I become a stockholder. Again, hit me up. I'll send you my email and we can start a conversation. We have someone at the company, Jennifer, who just so happened to be Raj's high school teacher that after some time joined us here at the company, and she is heading our private client or stockholder program. So I will put you in touch with her if you are interested in the program. Yes, it is available in KNL. Yes, Emperor Norton has a wiki page listing. Some varietals like Bordeaux, pre-sale bottles before they are released. Michaels, what do you mean by that?
You were asking me about futures. I was likening
okay.
that to the stockholder program because some vineyards will pre-sell their stock, pre-sell their years before they get out. You can go out and buy it, and then eventually, when it's bottled and sent, specifically, I know Philippe Rothschild does that, as well as Ikem does that, where you can buy it 3 years before the bottle's released, and you're getting it at a futures price. Some of them only declare vintages every year, and not every year, but every so many years. If not, they make it a lesser quality. It just depends on the quality of the wine. But I'm thinking that maybe the stockholder program is somewhat like that.
So I can definitely see one similarity, like with the Bhakta 50, for instance, being that you are able, when you purchase the entire set, it is the entire set from barrel 1 through 38. So since we are not selling barrels 30 through 38 currently, that is definitely an ability to get product before it is even released. But also the ability to tap into products that are no longer, or at least we no longer have for mass market. So the older barrels, unless you go again hunting for some of them around town, in the very few select stores that have picked up Bhakta 50 in the early days of Bhakta 50, it would be pretty hard to get. So it's a little bit into the future, a little bit going back into the past, as well as the program that I mentioned, like being inducted to this society, which does allow, by the way, for people to tap into some of the releases, the limited releases that we do early on. So if you are a stockholder member, we do send out the opportunity to either purchase or even sometimes just send out, depending on which set you've purchased, our new releases, so you are in the know and you get to taste well ahead of anybody else.
I just launched our traditional towards the end of the evening poll. So feel free to vote for your favorite child, Tom.
I clicked out of it. I'm sorry. My favorite child is the 1990 rum.
Wow.
It is something very unique. We didn't have it today. I wanted to keep some focus, and I also felt like we do get some really unique products here that I thought deserve more attention, let alone specifically the 1973. But yeah, the 1990 rum. I'm a rum geek. And I really enjoy rums, let alone Jamaican rums. And the 1990 is a blend of two beautiful Jamaican rums. And the travel that it took was really the unique part of it. It was married in bourbon casks, but then was purchased by a Canadian and moved up to Canada into Canadian rye casks. And lived most of its year in this cold climate. So a Jamaican rum in a cold climate is already a fish out of water. But then inside these Canadian rye casks, someone purchased it and moved it later on to Kentucky back into bourbon. And when we bought it, we moved it back up north to Vermont into Armagnac casks. So it's just this one of one. Nobody can even try to recreate this thing. We have a very limited supply of it. And for those who appreciate rum, I think it's an amazing gem. The bottle is priced at around $4.99. So for a rum, granted, there's not a whole lot of rums that are that old or in that price category, really. The only ones that we are seeing in the market are Appleton 30, Dictador 25, and The Last Drop. So there's not a whole lot of stuff that's this old, but there is nothing that went through this insane journey. And the end result, in my opinion, and I hate this kind of cliche of a whiskey drinker's rum, but it really is because of all the rye and the bourbon that it took over the years, and because it was in cold climate. So because it's a blend of Appleton Estate and Clarendon, you won't get a whole lot of funk on it to begin with, but then on top of that, you get these whiskey notes. And if I didn't tell you that it was a rum, if nobody told me that it was a rum, I may even think that it was a bourbon finished in rum casks rather than the other way around. So it really does straddle these two categories, and it's absolutely gorgeous. There are, I think, 25 different locations of Total Wines that currently have one single bottle in each of them. So you don't need to go very far to find it, but there isn't much of it.
That sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Such an interesting story.
Next,
Everybody had a chance to vote. Some of you are slacking.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna end the poll. You want to take a wild guess as to what the favorite of the evening was?
So from my experience tasting in events and stuff like that, it definitely seems like 1928 and 1973 are crowd favorites, but I think a lot of it is shock value. I think because the group comes from a different place of genuinely appreciating spirits and not necessarily just looking at the shock value. I think 2707 might be here in the mix. So I'm torn between 1973 and maybe 2707.
Okay. Ta-da.
1973 and 2707 and 1928
Yeah.
are tied, I see.
It was
Very
really
cool.
close.
Very cool.
1928 and 2707 both had 3 votes. Bourbon had 2 and 73 had 5. So
And I'm
and
really
then
glad that the
people had
bourbon
to
is
leave.
also getting some love here.
yeah, everybody got some love. Yeah, we missed a couple of people that had to leave early, so a couple of people didn't vote, but I want to make sure we got to talk about it.
Question, what did you say the MSRP on the 2707 was and the 1973?
2707, I believe, is suggested retail price around $80, maybe. That, you know, like, again, that is a suggested retail price.
Right.
Because it is so rare at this point. I'm sure that some retailers might have since
Remedy have a very good price.
Yeah, $64.99 plus tax.
They're a very good price, Remedy.
Yeah, that's a price to steal right there. What did I want to mention? Oh, I did want to say one thing. I'm sorry I forgot to mention this before, but if there are items that you are interested in high times, then this would probably be more alluring and relevant to you if you're going for the slightly more expensive bottles, such as vintages and maybe the bourbon, rye, the rum, and stuff like that. Jordan, the buyer at High Time, did extend the opportunity if you would like a little courtesy discount specifically for the Virtual Tasting Society. He will be very happy to extend that to you. All he asks is that you just email him because he wasn't able to generate a code specifically for us. So I'm going to send here in the, let me just type it in so you can have his email. And if you could please copy me, I'll send my email as well. So if you could copy both of us, he will be happy to provide you with a discount code to make it just ever so slightly more attainable. So this is me. And please hit me up if you also want to hear about the stockholder program or any events that we're doing in Southern California. And then let me grab Jordan's email real quick.
Thank Jordan for us. He's a mensch.
Yeah, he's great. He's really great. They are such a great partner for us. All right. Here we go. And this is Jordan Hansen's email. Come on. Copy. There we go. And paste. Here we go. So that is Jordan's email. Hit him up. He will provide you with a bit of a discount. And again, they have our entire catalog. So really, you'll be able to find pretty much everything that we can offer outside of the exclusive programs that we have with the stockholder program. And then if you so wish, you are more than welcome to also order from our retail website. There is a code going on right now that if you order, you get a free branded Bhakta glass. So if that is something that is more appealing to you than the discount, you're more than welcome to hit it up. I personally prefer to give the love and appreciation to my retail partners in California, since I'm the Minister of Spirits in California. But I wanted to extend all options to you, so you know what is out there.
Thank you. That's so cool.
Of course.
And what about the barrel or the mix that Vadim came up with? I'm assuming that's without peat.
So let me see real quick. I did save it. I'll be able to tell you what he put into his. I'm sure that if he is willing, we can maybe have a survey of discussing what would be of most interest. It does seem like a lot of you have a bit of an interest in peat, which is not too surprising. Let's see.
We have a mix of people that absolutely love it and people who completely abhor it. So it's always a matter of How smoky is it?
Vadim.
John, I agree with you. We like the Minister of Spirits title.
Yeah, I like that it's cheeky and different. I was trying to think of titles. We were looking into hiring someone for Northern California, which I would have overseen. We currently are not, but I was looking for a potential title change and was thinking what would be a fun California tie. So one of my ideas was Prospector of Spirits, but I'm open to more suggestions. Let's see if I can find Vadim's.
Tom, a suggestion, any way you guys can create for us a tasting blend and
I'm sorry, what do you mean?
for the different option on the 128, can you create for
So
us?
we are able to do pre-blended blends, and to do it more similarly to a barrel pick program where we provide pre-blended blends and you pick out of one of those. We have some retail partners that have done that before. As for creating a blend as a group, that is up to Vadim. I do have kits in California, so it's something that is possible. It would be limited to likely no more than 24 people. But that is technically something that we are able to offer if it's something that, and again, Vadim didn't want to front the entire amount for all of these bottles from his own pocket, understandably so. It is a sizable expense. So he was just looking for your, like, approval and
What, so how much would a bottle be if you do that, give and take?
it's a very small hike up from the 1928 like, so the suggested retail price for 1928 is again around $69, so we're looking at 74, like $75.
Okay, that's not bad at
So
all.
not a significant hike up.
Completely reasonable for a custom blend.
Yeah,
Oh.
and one of the fun items is that you get to write something on the neck of the bottle, which we have a calligrapher that hand writes it with gold ink. So of course we can call it the Virtual Tasting Society, but we've had some accounts that decided to, like, we had one that decided to call their blend Jeff. So you could really name it whatever you want.
Road. Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my goodness.
I wasn't able to find what Vadim blended right now, but I do have it because I saved it for your posterity. So I will share it to the group pending Vadim's approval. And you'll be able to, if you want, discuss whether or not you want to change something, or if we have enough excitement around doing a blend designated for the group, then we will definitely be able to put together an event where you could potentially hands-on be a part of the blending.
That's super cool.
Excellent.
Is it still light outside in California?
Vaguely.
Yeah, I thought I saw like some light shining on people's faces. I was like, I miss home.
Yeah, it's definitely twilight, but yeah, it's not quite so bright.
Yeah, it's the weather here is in Vermont is so interesting, and the winters are so intense, but summer is more akin to what I'm used to from Israel. Intense humidity and mosquitoes and stuff. Not I moved away from that. That's why I live in California.
Yeah.
But the campus is so magical that it kind of takes the sting away.
Yeah.
By the way, just so I can share with you. Oh, wait, hold on. I see that there's a few comments. Create a blending experience with selected components. For what?
Well, like a master
it's
blending
worth-
class kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, to clarify that, I did an experience with where it was a virtual blending experience where there were two potential blends to be created, and so we were sent components, and then through the course of the night we created the two different blends that were potentially going to be made into a final bottling. And
Yeah.
it was a crazy experience. We had 4 components, and over the course of the night, we ended up using like 10 Glencairns to create like cask strength versions of the blends, and then like different samplings. It was an insane night, but it was
So
basically
unfortunately, I don't know if like a virtual version of ours would make sense, just because we're talking about some vintages that again are slightly older. So the bottles that we send here for the virtual tasting society experiences are the same size of the bottles that I have in my kit. So basically, when we do like one of these kits should serve at the very least 4 people. And we use pipettes and little beakers to create the blends. And because there's such an array of options, because it's a pretty big matrix, because again, we're talking a choice of 1 through 4 different vintages out of a selection of a total of 8. So basically, that's already a lot. But then on top of that, 3 different choices of Calvados. It would be quite difficult to do this virtually. But it is definitely something that we can have in person somewhere in Southern California. Again, for up to 24 participants, 6 groups of 4 people. That would be definitely something that can be accommodated.
All right, Jason, I guess you're gonna have to jump on a plane.
Where are you, Jason?
I'm in Minnesota, so you'd have to give James and I plenty of notice so that we could arrange airfare and hotel and accommodations and that kind of thing.
I will say we are in, so I did write the states that we're in just in case like we have some members from other states. So we are currently in California, Colorado, Vermont, New York, Florida, Texas, Georgia, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, DC, Delaware, and Maryland. Where DC is a brand new market that is just opening. So if you are in DC and you're not seeing it in stores, that is perfectly reasonable. But we do have a new Minister of Spirits that will be overseeing that area. So the Great Lakes area has a pretty good representation. So granted, we're not in Minnesota. We are in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois. So it might be an easier skip and a hop for you over to say Illinois, where our amazing Minister of Spirits, Janae, is doing bonbon blends all the time. So you will be able to like shop various retailers that have made their own blends. So granted, it's not a part of like a blending experience, but it does allow to taste some other creations. And I'm sure we will have plenty of time to plan ahead if we do go ahead with a blending. So hopefully that will give you enough time. Done that with Johnny Walker. We had components that went into Johnny Black. Very cool.
Yeah, we've had the opportunity to do a couple of blending style classes with some brands, and it's a lot of fun. So I can imagine this would be quite the experience,
Yeah, for sure.
especially with all the options you guys have. I'm still sad I couldn't go. Like, awesome.
I did want to mention just like in this has very little bearing since it's just my personal preferences and each of our palettes are so different. But I did want to share with you some of my favorite vintages. I love 1982 for no other reason that the notes of it are intense. That they remind me of intense flavors of Majhul dates. And being from the Middle East, Majhul dates is very much like memories of baked goods. and confectionery cookies and all sorts. So that's one that I personally really love. 1996 is actually a pretty kind of widely beloved vintage because it is so different than many other vintages. So 1996 has a nice degree of rancio on it, given that it is much younger in comparison to, for instance, the 73 that we tasted. Thank you, Josh. The 1996, the reason a lot of us like it is because, again, the notes are super different. So dried fruits and winter spices are very common in Armagnac, as I mentioned. But 1996 has these notes of dried orange peel and burnt salted caramel. So these notes are just uniquely different than the rest. So it's not necessarily better or worse or whatever, because again, each of us have our own preferences, but it does stand out. So it is definitely one of my favorites. I was fortunate enough to taste 1942 and 1888. Some of the older stuff, and they're both absolutely stellar. 1888 is simply not within my personal financial reach. It is a 140-year-old spirit, just for context, and suggested retail price is around $13,000. So an absolute amazing value for what it is, but it is still a nice chunk of my annual salary, so I cannot afford something like that, even with an employee discount.
Yeah, that's when you look at it and you think first class isn't just a better seat, it's a better lifestyle.
Yeah, for sure.
That sounds awesome. I'm super curious because Josh mentioned in the chat earlier that everybody got to taste their birth year. And I was like, oh, that would have been so cool.
And that is something that obviously we can't
For the young people, I'm not sure we qualified, all of us.
Wait, what was your birth year, Golan?
I'm 69. You guys have only 73 and
Yeah,
up.
you're right. I think 69 is not one that we have. First of all, in the library, we only have up to 1970. But just since we're talking, let me look and see if we have 1969.
No, don't forget we tried the 72, and that was mine.
Nice.
It was good. It was good.
It was.
Yeah, we don't have 1969, unfortunately. So in the 60s, for instance, we have 62, 63, 64, 65, 66.
You have mine.
But they're all in France, right? They're not here.
No. We do have stock of bottled Armagnac of every vintage that we have available stateside as well.
Yeah, bottled, but not the barrel you kept.
No,
barrel in France. Yeah,
no. The barrels, the educational barrels that we have here on campus, stop at 1970s. That was what we that was what Raj felt like we can afford to open up for educational value. What's shared here? Oh, here, Bhakta 1888 Armagnac. 13,999,999.
Down from 19,999.
Exactly. It's on sale. It's almost a steal.
Almost.
I mean, look, again, we have to put things in context, you know, like paying 4 times as much for a 50-year-old Scotch, which I'm sure is absolutely delicious, but within context it is a youngin.
You buy a label. You never open those Scotch that the people buy from. They're never going to open them.
Yeah, true. And they probably wait until they auction it off 30, 40 years after.
I mean, you see some of those, right? It comes in a 750 bottle, and then there's a little 50 centiliter bottle that you buy as well. That's the one you drink, and the rest you just, you never open.
Yeah.
Which is stupid.
So unfortunate, because all of this was meant to be enjoyed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is something Raj is very much insistent. You know, the French there's a reason the French hoarded this to themselves. They wanted to keep it to themselves, but we're trying
they're
to
not
share
crazy.
this with the world.
Yeah, it reminds me, there's a not particularly fabulous film called Year of the Comet. The upshot is there's this really, really, really old, gigantic bottle of wine that was bottled the first recorded year of Halley's Comet. And this person who just really he's sort of the hero of the film, and he buys the bottle at the auction that the heroine is leading, and it's all this nonsense aside. And when nobody's like paying too much attention, he starts knocking the seal off of it, and people are like start freaking out because he's actually opening the damn bottle. And he offers her the first little glass of it, and she's like, oh my God. And the next thing you know, everybody's paying like whatever cash they have, they're like handing it over to try it. And that's kind of what it makes me think of for 140, 150-year-old Armagnac. I would so totally be there if I had that kind of money. Like, I would buy it and share it. It would sound so awesome.
We actually, we almost never pour like 1888, for instance, but we did have an event in Vegas recently. I believe it's called the Nth. The whiskey or spirits event in Vegas. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It is a pretty unique experience. I can't remember the name of the founder of the event, but he is a collector himself, and he quite often cracks open stuff from his own collection for the event, and some very unique and rare items. So we had an event as a part of that event, the Nth, and we were pouring 2014 bourbon, 1928, and 1888 single vintage Armagnac. So there's some lucky folks in Vegas that recently had a chance to taste the 140-year-old spirit.
Green with envy.
Well, maybe next year.
Yeah.
Vegas is pretty close.
Yes, Vegas is close.
Yeah, those prices on the Macallan is they can afford it. The branding has been strong for a very long time, and we do expect, like all of our stock to eventually not be unfortunately as affordable as it is now. We will like have to raise prices as stock grows lower, but thankfully we really do have an amazing collection, specifically 1973 and 1888 we have a good stock of. It really changes from year to year. There's nothing really to qualify why this vintage over the other, but of course, like the war vintages we have single bottles of, and the 60s we may have a little less of, but there are certain vintages that we have such an amazing collection of. Safe. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Oh my God, too funny. Buy 4 and save $50. Yeah.
Hey, I will say, I mean, you buy 4, that's still not the price of a home in California.
I'm sorry, if I spend that much on 4 bottles, they're gonna hand deliver it to me in a limo. Come on. I want someone with gloves to show up at my door in a penguin suit, and your bottles, madame.
It's gonna be like bringing the Stanley Cup out onto the ice.
Exactly. Come on, it's an event.
The problem is, I don't know if I want them to handle those bottles the same way they handle the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
No, it's the players you have to watch out for.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not trying to walk on ice, you'll be safe.
What they're gonna be the retail for the malt that you're releasing?
The Indian single malt, I'm not sure yet. We haven't had like a formal education on it yet. Everything I've told you and I've shared is like stuff that we've chatted with Peter Lynch, our master blender, the other day over sandwiches at lunch. So I will have like more formal information to share as soon as I have it. I can imagine that it will likely be similar to the pricing that we've had on our recent whiskey releases, which were around the $150 price point. But please do not take my word for it until I have official information to share.
Awesome sauce.
Oh, and you didn't mention that Peter was actually with us in the blending lab when we was doing the blending too. So he was kind of teaching some of the experience that he has. So we didn't mention that. So
yeah, and Peter is actually the protege of Dave Pickrell. He learned everything that he knows from being Dave's protege in Whistle Pig. The 2014 bourbon that we had a chance to taste is his first release with Bhakta. So that's another thing that's fun and unique. Like once he came into the fold, is when we've first used our 1973 for finishing. So I can't wait to see what else he comes up with.
That's a banger for our
cool
first one.
I'm sorry?
That's a banger for our first one.
Right? Yeah. And he's a very cool guy. He knows the ins and outs of like all of the chemical and biological processes, from barrel aging to fermentation to everything in between. So like it is both artistic and sensory as well as scientific for him. And it's just nice to have such a fountain of knowledge at our disposal to be able to further our knowledge as ambassadors and salespeople.
That's so cool. I like that you guys take so much trouble to teach all of your various ambassadors and salespersons so much about your brand and how well you're able to talk to all the different things that you guys have available. That's just so incredible.
And you really have to have people that are passionate, because it's such a wide catalog that deals with certain spirit categories that are not very well known, and then some experimental stuff. So you need passion, and I can't speak from my experience. All the ministers of spirits that we have are very passionate people.
That's super cool. You gotta love what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, my friends are very envious of my work, not necessarily because of the type of work, because not all of them are grand drinkers, but because I'm genuinely happy to do it.
It's not much more you can ask for.
Yeah.
You guys have any more questions? I want to be respectful of your time. I'm not going to kick anybody off if you want to keep chatting, but I'd like to thank you so much, Tom, for joining us tonight.
Of
Thank you
course.
for a really incredible tasting and so much information. I'll be processing it for days. But anyway, y'all feel free to stick around. I'm going to just end recording. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you. And I am going to jump off. I have a date with the pool here. Need to kind of wash off all the humidity off of me.
Sounds like a plan.
But thank you so much for joining, and thank you for tasting and listening and asking questions. I really appreciate it. I will share the blend that Vadim created as soon as I can find it and get a permission from him. And I really hope to do more of these, because there's a lot more to share, and then to maybe do our own bonbon for the group soon.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much for everything, Tom. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
See you soon.